This is WorldView. Thank you for joining me. I'm Yvonne Katsande on this beautiful day. You know, it's healing streams everywhere, actually. Healing streams everywhere. We just had a beautiful 3 days of healing streams all over the world. Now, you can imagine the different changes of things that are happening in the world. But today, I'm here to talk about the just ended shutdown in South Africa. I don't know whether I should say just ended. Maybe it might continue, in the words of Julius Malema. But just yesterday, in actual fact, South Africa was celebrating Human Rights Day. Now, that goes down a long way in the history of the country. Human rights, people exercising freedom. We look at South Africa in the past and we look at South Africa now. Is it still really Human Rights Day as before? And if not, what could have possibly changed? So you would know that the shutdown, the economic freedom fighters, the EFF, they held a national shutdown on Monday as the party members called for President Cyril Ramaphosa to step down. So the shutdown was marked by a heavy police presence with enforcement agencies monitoring proceedings, which included about 3,000 soldiers deployed to maintain law and order during this march. And more than 550 people were arrested during the EFF national shutdown protest. So the protest action was focused on primarily, different issues. But in Pretoria, where we had like a big crowd, there was about 2,000 to 2,500 protesters gathered at the church square before marching to Ramaphosa's official residence, Matlaba Mhlopfu. So smaller protests were scattered across the country. The government has described the EFF protest as a failure. But you know what? Interestingly, EFF said this was the most successful protest in the history of South Africa. Have a listen to this.
The problem is that the tyranny is running the country and their own movement. That's why they came here today. Because we are the only people who are not scared of Cyril Ramaphosa, his soldiers and police. We are not scared of Bekikele. We are not scared of the police. The commissioner of KZN, we must take him to court after this march so that his utterances can be declared invalid and unconstitutional. He said in one of the press conferences that they have now abandoned the police service. They are now going to use combat. He's got no such option in the Constitution. Police service is not his underwear that he changes anyhow he wants. It is a police service. Whether he's sleeping, whether he's awake, it's a police service. It's a service to our people. It's not a combat. But the desperation of wanting to be something high in the police has made him to say nonsensical, stupid things. The history will remember you. That you are not scared of 3,400 and something soldiers. You are not scared of 18,000 policemen on the streets. You are not scared of the helicopters that are roving on top of our houses every day as part of intimidation. You said helicopter, no helicopter. Ramaphosa must fall. I'm going to Ramaphosa must fall. That is a sign.
All right, so that's a call there from the EFF. Well, some other opposition parties in the country feel exactly the same, but this protest was actually received with mixed sentiment. Did you know that some parts in South Africa were completely quiet, while other people went out, took to the streets, obviously to express their discontent? Now, to speak more on that is Comrade Karyn Maughan. He was also part of the protest. I'm sure you could see him on that video, marching hand to hand, hand in hand, in actual fact, with EFF leader, that is Julius Malema. Karl, thank you for joining me on the program today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, and my apologies that I must do this interview with you from a car, but I'm at the private prosecution that President Jacob Zuma had brought against advocate Billy Downer and journalist Karyn Maughan in Pietermaritzburg. And wow. I left the courtroom to do the interview, and the only relatively quiet place that I could find is the vehicle in which I came. So my apologies for that.
No, that's perfectly fine.
Let me immediately say Okay. Let me immediately say that I agree with what Comrade Julius Malema said, that this shutdown was a resounding success. There had never been in the history of South Africa such a successful shutdown through the length and the breadth of our country. And also, it was remarkably peaceful, and it was within the parameters of the law. It is sad that the South African government decided to push a narrative of violence and to say that the shutdown was going to disintegrate into violence and anarchy, because it never was going to. It's also sad that the South African government deployed the SANDF, the South African National Defence Force, and the South African Police Service against its own population. You know, I saw so many tanks, armored vehicles, soldiers with assault rifles on our streets. The only memory that I could have of having seen such a situation in the past of the army and the police being deployed against the people of South Africa was during the apartheid era. And really, it reminded me of the 16th of June, 1976, which, of course, is a terrible indictment on this Cyril Ramaphosa regime.
Okay, so, you know, it's like there were two sides to the story. There were two sides to the story. One side was that violence even started at 12 midnight. Shots fired in different places. Who fired the shots is what we're still asking ourselves. But we had the army on the streets. We had the police on the streets. What happened? Who were those people? Were they ever identified? And then we still also have the story of the EFF that says, just like you've also confirmed, this was a resounding success. What is your take on the army being deployed on what was termed a peaceful protest?
As I've indicated to you, this is an indication of a government that is becoming increasingly repressive. A government that no longer sees its people as its friends, as the people of this country, but it's beginning to experience its own people as their enemy. And the reason for that is because this government fails so dismally to provide in the most basic services, in electricity, in clean running water, proper education, health care, no proper policing, so that we've got the highest murder rate and the highest rape rates in the world. All of these things are happening, and I think increasingly the government realizes that the vast majority of people in this country have lost their trust and their hope in this government. And the national shutdown was that collective expression of people throughout the length and the breadth of the country saying, we've lost hope in this government, saying that we have rejected the African National Congress, which for a long time had a huge liberation dividend and was seen by many South Africans still as a liberation movement. Now it is no longer the case. They see the ANC as a sell-out political organization that does not represent the liberation hopes and the liberation struggle of the past.
But why do they seem like they're failing much? I mean, it's rather of great interest that we speak of how electricity all of a sudden was restored less than 24 hours to the protest, and right immediately at 12 midnight after the protest, we come back again to the start of load shedding. Why is that? Why does it seem like the electricity issue, the energy crisis, is being politicized?
Well, the energy crisis has been politicized right from the beginning. And the energy cuts that we've seen, the blackouts, have been very artificial and human-made, with a clear intention to run down the state-owned enterprise Eskom, to eventually dismember it and to privatize it. That is the agreement that Cyril Ramaphosa made with Joe Biden, which he also made with the British government. So the Western imperialist powers have made an agreement with Cyril Ramaphosa that electricity in South Africa will be privatized, and with it comes all the insecurities that we see now, because the privatization process is accompanied by moving South Africa's electricity generation and therefore its power security away from coal to so-called independent power producers and sustainable energy, which nowhere in the world has been successful to give a secure energy supply, and certainly it is not successful in South Africa. You know, Yvonne, the irony is that while we are being told to move away from coal power generation, nations such as Germany and the United Kingdom and France have actually recommissioned their coal power stations. And the irony is even worse. They import A grade, the best grade coal from South Africa to power those power stations while we are sitting in darkness for up to 8 hours a day. So this situation is human-made, it is politically motivated, and the people of South Africa have finally realized that it is the case. And as you quite correctly say, the fact that it was possible to suddenly stop load shedding for the period of the national shutdown, and immediately thereafter, like you turn a switch, turn it back on, that we have load shedding, is simply an indication of how manipulated this crisis in fact is.
All right, so this is after the protest, this is after the shutdown. People have gone to the streets, they've expressed their discontent. What happens now?
I think the thing that is the most important of this protest, and you have referred to those videos of leaders of various political parties and political civil society organizations walking hand in hand. Now, those are images that we have not seen for a long time in South Africa. So I think the most important development is that there's a growing unity amongst the progressive left forces in South Africa, saying that we all agree that Cyril Ramaphosa must go. We also all agree with a basic limited program of action that we need to implement. Now, this is a major breakthrough, and it is indeed a watershed moment in the political history of South Africa. And I believe that for the upcoming national elections of 2024, it is going to have a huge impact. The chance is now that all these various progressive forces will come together, form a united front, and be able to confront the ANC government and replace them with a truly people's progressive government. And that is the fear that the Ramaphosa regime is now realizing that it is beginning to happen. And that is also why we have seen such a repressive reaction by them using the SANDF and the South African police force. They won't say so publicly, they will keep on using their propaganda, but I can assure you that in the inner conference rooms of government, there is consternation. They are truly scared by this unity that is now being forged.
You see, there's a lot of activities that have happened in South Africa over the past few months. Let's just maybe say 6 months. First and foremost, we had the Americans telling us that there's a threat, a security threat in South Africa twice. You know, there's a lot of things that have also happened with regards to the government and failing to deliver. The energy crisis that we're talking about. There seems to be just a whole lot of things that are going on. The Reserve Bank itself and the banking system of the country is also threatened. The globalist agenda, can we say South Africa has been colonized by the globalist agenda as it stands right now? Are we seeing the hands of the deep state move in the country?
Absolutely. You know, Pretoria, or Tshwane as the bigger metropole of Pretoria is known, has got more intelligence services and intelligence operators than anywhere else in the world. So the deep hand of imperialism is truly active here in South Africa. And we shouldn't be surprised by that. South Africa is geographically a very important location. In terms of the mineral wealth that South Africa has, it is critically important for the imperialist Western world. And therefore, they will pull out all stops to try to continue to control our economy, to try to continue to make sure that those who are their agents, their acolytes, are in power in South Africa. And unfortunately, in 2017, at the ANC's 54th National Conference, they managed to bring an agent of Western imperialism first in through huge amounts of money that was used, massive bribes, over R1 billion. They brought that in. My apologies, there was an incoming call.
It's okay.
I hope you can still hear.
Yes, we can.
They brought that in, and at the same time, they then made sure that Ramaphosa gained control over the state. And you can see how Ramaphosa has been the agent of Western imperialism. The resistance that you see today is exactly against that kind of manipulation and control of South Africa by Western imperialism and their proxies within the current government in South Africa.
So how come we're not seeing a case of state capture being opened? President Jacob Zuma went through this, right? But they were using the Guptas, capturing the state of South Africa. So now we speak about the Americans meddling, you know, in the economy of South Africa, these imperialists meddling in the economy of South Africa. Are we going to see another state capture trial?
Well, certainly, once the Ramaphosa government is removed, there will have to be in-depth investigations into the way that he was used by Western European and United States powers to gain control of South Africa. And I'm confident that once there is this change of government, this shift in power, people like Ramaphosa will certainly be charged, and also those that he brought in with him. So the future may hold big political stroke economic investigations and finally criminal cases being brought against these people. You are beginning to see preludes to that with the private prosecutions that is beginning to happen in South Africa. One of those is the private prosecution that I'm attending today against the advocate and the journalist who abused their powers and actually stole private and privileged information of President Jacob Zuma.
Oh, wow.
Another that we hope to introduce, and my organization, the African Radical Economic Transformation Alliance, is certainly going to be involved in that, is to bring a legal case against Ramaphosa about the huge amounts of foreign currency, dollars, that he illicitly was hoarding on his farm, called Pala Pala, without any declaration to the South African Reserve Bank or to the South African Revenue Services. And it is evident when you trace the origins of that money that it was brought into the country through all kinds of underhand intelligence channels to give him a war chest of money to be able to fight the conference that the ANC had now in December, to use again huge amounts of money for bribes, and also use that money to buy people throughout the country in order to make sure that he remains secure. Ramaphosa is buying his way to continue in power, and the money that he uses to do so is coming from the imperialist powers, the West and the United States of America. And what happened at Pala Pala and the dollars that were hoarded there was just one example of what is actually so tragically going on in our country.
Now, Carl, this is really big, and I hope you realize that. You know, all these, I don't know whether to call them allegations or all these reports coming up, you know, against the existing regime. These are really big claims. This, if at all it becomes a trial, it will be definitely a very big trial. So my question now is, having said all these things...
May I just say, sorry, Yvonne.
Okay,
May I just say, it is not just allegations. There was an independent panel under a former Chief Justice, Mr. Justice Ngobo, that was asked to investigate these allegations against Ramaphosa. And that panel, and it was really a panel of people with great judicial ability, said Ramaphosa has a very, and in fact they used the word very serious, prima facie case to answer, but of course he managed to escape having to face the consequences of that report because he used the majority of the ruling party of the ANC in Parliament to refuse to accept that report. But it doesn't detract from the validity of that report, and as you quite correctly say, the serious situation that we are faced with in South Africa.
All right, so I think it will be of great interest for the South Africans listening and watching you right now. The different leaders of the different political parties that were walking hand in hand during the protest on Monday, are they mature enough to form a coalition that can then challenge the government? I'm asking this because we've seen coalitions fall apart. In the last election, it almost looked like a joke, you know, coalitions just fell apart. People acted as if they never actually agreed on anything. But are the political leaders mature to that extent to actually hold the fort so strong that they can go against the government?
The African Radical Economic Transformation Alliance was specifically formed to work for that unity amongst all these progressive political parties.
As in, you're the one who's responsible to bring them together. Is that what you're saying? You're the one who's responsible in bringing them together?
Well, obviously, that responsibility isn't just given to one. One also has to claim it. One has to work for it. And I can tell you that myself and my fellow board members of ARETA have met with all the leaders of these various political parties. And all of us are in agreement, as I've said in the earlier part of this interview, to form a solid base of a minimum program of action for such a united front, such a united coalition to be formed. So we are doing this very differently from the haphazard manner in which coalitions and united fronts in the past had been formed in South Africa. We're doing it with great deliberation. We're doing it with a lot of preparation and discussions also behind the scenes. I've had tens of meetings with these leaders, and we continue to talk. I'm confident that what you've seen at the National Shutdown is an indication of the progress that we have made.
Are they willing?
And by the time we will get to 2024, we will have a solid foundation for a united front which will not fall apart, which will be a strong left progressive coalition which can take over and lead this country out of the disastrous quagmire where we find ourselves at the moment.
Yeah, so the other reason why I would have also asked about the maturity of the political leaders is that one of the outstanding features during this protest was the fact that we saw you and Julius Malema walking hand in hand. Now, this comes after Julius Malema literally made fun of you. He said that you were a disaster of a person. One morning you wake up, you say, Es Mahashule for president. The next time you come back, you call on this. He didn't understand what kind of a character. In fact, he goes on to say that characters like you should not be allowed to lead. So we found it very interesting to see you walking hand in hand with Julius Malema.
Let me first of all say that when Comrade Julius made those remarks, I did not respond. I did not retaliate because I knew that at some point in the future, we will have to literally, as you've seen us, stand hand in hand. So I'm glad that that decision that I've taken not to respond has paid off. And I'm glad that Comrade Julius has shown himself to be a mature politician who was not going to allow those remarks that he made stand, but to move on. We had a wonderful conversation with each other. He indicated to me that he is strongly in support of us all working together. So what you've just spoken about, these things happen in politics. It's water under the bridge. We are moving forward. We understand that there's a much bigger picture that we need to now put together. And there's a much more important task to do than to hold on to little grudges and perhaps unhappinesses about what one person or the other said about each other.
Can you trust Julius Malema? Is he a character to be trusted?
We all have to trust each other. We all have to work together. The EFF has a central and important role to play because it's a mass-based political organization and movement. If it wasn't for the mobilization that the EFF had done in the run-up to the national shutdown, it wouldn't have been the huge success that it was. And I must say that my engagement with Comrade Julius during the run-up to the shutdown and during the shutdown showed a person of maturity, a person who understands the immense responsibility that rests on his shoulders, on the shoulders of his organization as a mass-based movement. And it is, of course, a responsibility that also rests on the shoulders of all of us in all the various political organizations. We must put pettiness behind us. We must not get bogged down in little ideological squabbles. We must keep in mind the bigger picture, and the bigger picture is that Ramaphosa must go, that a minimum program of action for the radical economic transformation of our country has to be established. And through that process, that we can turn the fortunes of this country around and save our nation, bring employment back to our people, bring down the terrible levels of crime, bring back electricity, make sure that our economic institutions are restructured and changed so that they can be of service to our people. And most importantly, in addition to all of this, to get rid of the Western imperialist agents that have captured our country and to make sure that they pay the price, that they are legally held responsible for the terrible deeds that they have committed.
Country. I mean, I would like to believe a lot of South Africans would definitely agree with you. Bring back the electricity. Some have gone for weeks, if not months, without the electricity. So I guess that's a resounding yes across the whole country. Are we likely to see another shutdown anytime soon?
Well, shutdowns take time to organize. You saw how many months this massive national shutdown took to organize. But of course, we said right from the beginning that this shutdown is not a once-off event. It will continue with rolling mass action. Comrade Julius Malema has also referred to that. And you will see in the days and the weeks that continue now that rolling mass action will proceed. And as I've said to you, what happened on Monday, the 20th of March, in the history books of South Africa will be written as an important watershed moment, in fact, as a tipping point. The politics of South Africa, the balance of power in South Africa, the empowerment of the majority of South Africans who once again, after the shutdown, feel that they are able to take their own lives and their own destiny into their hands, has made a massive difference about the political environment, the political climate in this country. And Ramaphosa and his regime will fall. It is not a question of if, it is now only a question of when.
Wow, very interesting remarks coming out from you there. Now, before we round up, I just want to talk about the reason why, I know you touched on it while you were there with former President Jacob Zuma. We know that former President Jacob Zuma's legal team, like you rightly said, took the stand today in Pietermaritzburg High Court as challenges brought against his private prosecution of the state advocate Billy Downer, that's the man, and the journalist Karyn Maughan continue. That's it. So Downer is the lead.
Billy Downer and Karyn Maughan,
yes,
who have been served with private criminal, and I must emphasize, criminal prosecution papers, and the matter is now being heard in court today. The background to it is that Billy Downer took confidential documents about President Zuma's health, in fact, medical reports,
Wow.
and he illegally gave it to Karyn Maughan, and Karyn Maughan published it. Now, that is a contravention of President Zuma's privacy. It is a contravention of the South African Constitution and the law. And that is why President Zuma decided to bring this private criminal prosecution against them, because the action that they have committed is not something which can be described as freedom of speech or freedom of the media. And I saw there were a number of journalists. I just want to make this point because it's very important. There were a number of journalists from SANEF who were protesting outside the court, and I believe they were very, very misguided in their protest, because they had posters that said that they are standing there for press freedom. And I walked over to them and I said, guys, you seem to confuse an issue of criminality, and I've just described to you the crime that had been committed by Billy Downer and Karyn Maughan, and the issue of freedom of speech. This is not an issue of freedom of speech. This is a crime that had been committed in contravention of the rights of President Zuma and the privileges to also confidentiality of your privileged medical records. Unfortunately, these arrogant journalists turned their backs on me. They said that I must not insult them by saying that they don't understand the Constitution. Okay. But the problem I have with the kind of journalism that we have in South Africa, those very same journalists who stood with their posters saying that they are supporting Karyn Maughan, who is a criminally accused charged person standing in the dock here in the Pietermaritzburg High Court, then put their posters aside, walk into the courtroom, and start reporting on the very same matter. Now, I ask you as a journalist, Yvonne, where is the objectivity? Where is the professionalism as a journalist? When one moment you protest outside, you become an active political player. You express your view that you support Karyn Maughan. The next moment you walk into the court and you say, now I'm going to give an objective report about what is happening in this courtroom. Now, surely that is not possible.
Well, I've got an answer.
Surely that is a total aberration.
I've got an answer for you when it comes to that. You ask me, as a journalist, what do I think? I think right now we are in an era where we can actually see the difference between the kind of journalism. You see, we have the deep state pseudo kind of like journalism, and we have the truth journalism that is silenced more often than not. So fortunately for me, I don't belong to the people that support the deep state, that don't know where they stand. I know exactly my standpoint, and I support the truth. So I don't think I would have been found, or I will be found, in any group of somehow kind of like confused journalists. That won't happen. So Downer is the lead prosecutor.
No, I wasn't, let me just say, I wasn't attacking you.
No, not at all.
I was just asking the rhetorical question.
Absolutely.
Because it was such a ridiculous situation that I saw playing itself out this morning that I was truly flabbergasted.
No, we're on the same side. We're actually saying the same thing. So Downer is the lead prosecutor.
Good.
Yeah, he's the lead prosecutor in Zuma's arms deal corruption case, right? So if President Zuma wins this case, where does this put him? Because we know that that whole, case, it took a whole different turn of events, which obviously led him to the position that he's facing right now. Would that change things around?
Of course. Downer was the lead prosecutor in the arms deals case right from the beginning. Now, this private prosecution will prove what we have said throughout, so that Downer had been involved with politicians, had been involved with intelligence agencies to spin together, to put a web of accusations and allegations together against President Zuma, which were not based on fact, but which were politically motivated. And if Downer is found to be guilty of this very serious crime for which he's being charged now, he will not be able to continue with this prosecution. And everything that he had done around this prosecution and the manner in which the docket had been put together will now be in serious jeopardy. So this case is critical also for exposing how the 23-year-long persecution that President Zuma had been subjected to as part of this farcical arms deals case had been put together to get rid of him. Because exactly the same people that ganged up against President Zuma and wanted him out of power, they didn't want him to be the president of South Africa because they knew he was not going to accept the kind of Western imperialist meddling that I've just described in so much detail to you earlier.
Yes.
So they had to get him out, and they had to replace him with a pliable agent such as Cyril Ramaphosa. And now they've succeeded to do that, but this case has got the potential to truly rip that mask off their faces and to show the true evil and ugly mask that is behind all the propaganda and the sweet talk that we've seen in South Africa. This case is of critical importance to help us to get to the bottom of what is actually going on in our country and how our society has been captured by Western imperialism.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Karyn Maughan, for those comments. Well, we definitely will get an update from you on how that case where you are right now will go with former President Jacob Zuma, and also updates from different political party leaders in terms of what next after this national shutdown, what happens next, leading into the 2024 elections as well. But thank you so much for your time. And thank you for sitting in your car just to make it for this program. I really appreciate that.
No problem. And I can tell you, I'm going to meet with all of those leaders soon. In fact, tonight I run what is called a Twitter space, which usually has massive audiences of up to 30,000 people. And tonight we are doing on that Twitter space at 7 o'clock an evaluation of the national shutdown. And we have the question that we are going to discuss amongst political leaders who will be on the panel tonight. How do we move forward with the gains of the national shutdown to succeed eventually in our objective to make sure that Ramaphosa and his failed government will certainly go?
Wow. All right. Thank you so much, Comrade Carl. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining us on the program today.